Welcome, everybody, to another very special episode of the Two Fish at the Table Poker Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Ben, on PokerStars.
And I'm one of your hosts, East Coast Sam, and today we're joined by a very special guest. You may recognize him from the show Breaking Bad, but he's decided to stop by today and talk about his poker experience, Mr. Iverson Cotton Snuffer. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you doing?
Doing fine. Thanks for having me.
And so we all remember Mr. Snuffer from his two-episode stint in the 2017 World Series of Poker Main Event, where he often squared off with a Mr. Charlie Carrel. But there's a whole side of our guest in the poker world that we have not yet had the privilege to learn about, and we're happy to ask about his questions about his poker past, what brought him to poker, and all that fun stuff. And so why don't we get right into it? So from the start here, what got you into poker?
Well, I actually started playing poker at age probably 10 or 11.
Wow.
And I was a card mechanic by age 17.
Mm-hmm.
I played pool and poker for a living up until age 24, and then I became a Christian, so I gave it up, and I didn't play for years.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't play anything for years.
So what kind of got you back into playing?
Well, I kept watching the shows on television, the tournaments, and I'm real competitive. I played athletics, and I'm a competitive person. I thought, well, I can do that. Now, I'd never played Texas Hold'em, but we played everything else in the world. Back then, the big game was 7-card stud and 5-card stud, but we played other games similar to Hold'em, and I just felt like that I could compete. And so in late 2010, I entered a tournament and actually final tabled it. And,
wow.
And so it just went on from there. I owned a business, so I only got to play part-time. And while I was playing, I was usually getting texts and phone calls and having to use my breaks and dinner break to call customers or call the store. So it was a little bit different than a normal player gets to do.
Mm-hmm. And so, this entire podcast was founded upon a love for those classic tournament ESPN broadcasts of the main events over the years.
Yeah.
So it seems like we have some common ground there. When you would watch those tournaments, were there any players that really jumped out at you as some of your favorites to watch?
Well, actually, my favorite player ever was probably between Negreanu and I really like Negreanu's style.
Mm-hmm.
I play a little different, of course, not nearly as well, but I have a little different style of play. But I liked at that time Gus Hansen was my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked his style because he played any two cards and he played them well. So he was probably my favorite. Actually, he was one of the only guys that I would have wanted to take a picture with while I was out in Vegas, and I was able to do that. I think that was 2019.
Oh, cool.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Were there any particular years that were interesting to you, and were you more interested in the main event or other events at the WSOP?
You're always going to be more interested in the main event,
mm-hmm.
but I watched other poker shows on TV, and I was just interested in the whole thing, the camaraderie, the competition,
mm-hmm.
And being able to do something as you age. You can, even though they say the younger players have the advantage, they do in stamina
mm-hmm.
and such, but they don't necessarily in experience. And as long as your mind is still working properly, I think you can compete even as you get much older.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems very true. Yeah.
And, a quick trip to Hendon Mob will show that you have around $700,000 in live tournament winnings. Would you say that you're primarily a tournament player, or do you get into the cash game scene as well?
No, I'm more of a tournament player. I don't necessarily like cash. I play it if I get bored occasionally, but it reminds me of back when I was actually, I hate to say this, but it reminds me of back when I was cheating people out of their money when I was younger. I could do anything with a deck of cards, and it just reminds me of that, and people actually pulling the money out of their pockets, and some of them can't afford it. So I prefer tournament by far.
As a card mechanic, that entails sort of manipulating the cards in the deck in your favor?
Yes. Well, honestly, there's a lot to it, but you never manipulate the cards in your favor. You manipulate it in one of the guys that you've got in the game's favor. Gotcha. Because you wouldn't deal to yourself. That wouldn't go over very well. But you usually have to have three people. I was the guy that what you call ran up the deck. I could deal six people, three of a kind. I could do all different kinds of things. But then you have to pass it to somebody to false cut. In other words, act like they're cutting cards, but they're not. And then you deal to the third player. And but I wrote a book about it called "When the Dealing's Done," and I try to explain it as well as possible so that even a novice poker player could understand it.
I think there was a scene in Rounders that kind of had a similar of card mechanic moment in it when Matt Damon's friend was sort of dealing him from the bottom of the deck. So that's kind of a Hollywood example maybe of that sort of.
It is. My specialty wasn't dealing off the bottom of the deck, right. Although we had another guy that was. I dealt, I just run the hands up, and then I could deal what's called deuces. That's the second card. Like I would hold a card back. Say if a guy had two queens in the hole and a queen up, and he had a seven, I would make sure I held a seven back and deal the other people the second card, hold a seven for my guy so that I filled him up so that a straight or a flush didn't get him. So there's a lot to it. There's a whole lot more to it than just that. We did lots of different things.
Is there any way for other players at the table to spot tricks like that?
Well, I tell you, it depends on who's doing it, how they're doing it, and honestly, if you're not a good what I call square player, if you can't play, you're probably going to get caught, because if you can't play but you can cheat, you'll do things that don't make sense and allow you to get caught. I can honestly say that I was never once even suspected as being the guy. I was the guy that they patted on the back and said, "This boy's okay. He's good." And others, which were probably as talented as I was with the cards, would get caught because they couldn't play and they did crazy things. I don't know if you saw the movie The Sting.
Yes.
But it had what's called, everybody says, "Oh, I got coolered," or, that's cooler. Well, an actual cooler is where you're replacing the entire deck with what's called a cold deck.
Yeah.
And they did that in The Sting. Well, we had a guy that could do that pretty well. And one time he left the second deck in the floor right in front of him. So, there's so many different ways, different variances. We made our own mark cards and put them back in a cellophane pack. And then, like I said, there's so many levels to it. And we would have a street vendor go sell them 100-mile radius, and our cards would be there when we got there. So it was a lot to it.
And then I think besides that part of your background, you also were a snooker player, a pool player.
Yeah, pool hustler. How was that like?
Yeah, I was a better than average pool player. I knew, or still do, Alan Hopkins. I know Alan Hopkins and Mike Siegel and little David and a bunch of people that were the best players at that time came through. There was a guy named Bird Eye in our town who would play anybody, and he lost tons of money. But he would play anybody with a certain spot. You know, he wouldn't play them even. I don't know how familiar you are with pool, but like in 9-ball, they'd probably give him the 6 and a break. Mm-hmm. In other words, he just has to go to the 6 or make the 6 or 9 where they have to go all the way to the 9. But I was, without trying to sound wrong here, I was the best player in West Virginia for my age. Now, with that being said, if we would have just eased down to Florida, I wouldn't have been nearly the best pool player at my age. So I was a better than average pool player who possibly could have been what you'd call a professional player, wow. But I didn't have the same passion for it as I do for poker tournaments.
Gotcha. And so, what is it about these games and activities and the competition that really gets you so enthusiastic about these sort of things? Is it? Did you have somebody in your younger days that influenced you into trying out these activities, these games, or was it something you kind of did on your own?
Well, my dad loved poker, and we would play. He would keep me up playing all night, and then I'd have to go to school with no sleep. So the competitive nature is, I think it's within. Like, I played sports. I even pitched baseball into my early 40s, and wow. So I was always competitive. And then this just gave an older guy a chance to compete with anybody, the younger guys, girls, or the older guys. So, and then the camaraderie, like you miss the camaraderie of sports. Well, you have that. Even though you're competing against people, you make a lot of really, really good friends in the poker community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So as being back up to poker here, so what I know you mentioned you had the availability in that summer of 2017 to actually play the main event. What was that trip to the Rio like for you to start off with?
It was actually surreal. I had 2 heart attacks and open heart surgery. Had the open heart surgery on February the 13th. And so I was just healing up from that, but it allowed me not to have to work. I had a swimming pool, hot tub, and fireplace business, and we were really busy in the summer. That's why I did not get to play the main event, or actually any events much during the summer. But I was able to go out there and play, and I enjoyed it. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I was just glad to be there, and I was fortunate enough to cash in several other events as well as the main. And I can honestly say that was probably the most clear-headed I'd been to play poker, which allowed me to be more successful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you cashed in the Crazy Eights event. You got 153rd place, and you made nearly $5,000. How was that experience like, and how did that prepare you for the main event?
It was good. There was a lot of people in that tournament, and
yeah.
And I mean, it wasn't. It's kind of like playing in a regional game, like in sports, getting ready to go play in the state tournament or the national tournament. Mm-hmm. It was fun, and I was, it was really competitive. But it taught me that I could last with 8,000 people. I could still be around near the end.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so let's just get right into it. So the main event, those first few days, how did those first few days go for you in that tournament?
Well, I didn't play the main event at all like I normally play. Mm-hmm. I changed gears. My first goal was, hey, this is the first one I've ever played. I want to cash in it, first
right.
of all.
Yes. Yeah, of course.
And so I played a lot more conservative, and then my chip stack made me play even more conservative. Normally, I'm like the Gus, the wild man at the table, which helps me at my age because, they look at you and, an old man, if he's in there, he's supposed to have pocket aces. So, it really helped me, but I was never able, even all the way through. Now, I folded pocket queens, folded ace queen, folded ace king pre-flop.
Wow.
And, of course, went out on pocket queens. The situation happened 1,000 times. I'd still do it because I got blindsided. I was shooting at the guy that re-raised, and the guy that originally raised had the real hand. I had queens. The guy that I thought I had beat had jacks, and then this guy woke up with kings, and then he flops a king. So right in the window. So
yeah. So you get moved to the TV table on day 5, and what was that experience like, knowing that you were going to be on the big TV featured table?
I actually enjoyed it. When they broke our table up, I just knew they were going to take me to that table because they had interviewed me several times because of the Heisenberg thing and the backstory and stuff like that. And I just knew I was going to be there, so I was excited instead of nervous.
Mm-hmm. That table had some pretty heavy hitters. You had players like Kathy Liebert, Greg Mueller, a very young Charlie Carrell, and the table was very chip dense. A lot of chips at that table. I think you joined up around a little over 1 million chips to begin with, so you're just below the chip average, but you're still pretty below the table average. So, was your game plan at that point to continue doing your style of poker?
Well, I tried it a few times, and as you noticed, I got cut off. Every time I would try to get a little ahead of myself, I would get, somebody would wake up with a hand, or Charlie would come over top of me. You're not playing the hometown guys anymore. They're not going to sit there and let you, bully them around. Mm-hmm. But I originally was going to try to play my game, and I kept getting cut off and cut off and cut off. So I finally had to settle down and try to play more like I had played previously, because I did not want to get knocked out on the TV tape.
Oh, yeah. So speaking of Charlie Carrell, what was your first interaction with him like, and what was your sort of sense of his playing style and personality?
I knew exactly what his playing style was, and of course he made his personality known very quickly. Really nice guy. It took me a little bit to know what his table talk meant, and I finally caught on. Actually, after we got off of the TV table, I was able to catch him in one of his little speeches and and win a pot. But the pot that I folded is the one I get beat around the most for. And if I'm going to be honest here, if it's just a regular novice player, I could see where they would kick me. But it's the hand that flopped ace 5-5, and I had ace jack, and I was actually trapping him. Right. And if anything lower than a jack comes, I'm going all in. I'm going to check, raise all in. And the king comes. So now, if he's got ace deuce, he just chopped the pot with me. So he makes me put most of my chips in, and he comes up with that speech, what's going to happen is I'm going to bet, you're going to call, and then we're going to check, and chop. And also, I knew that he was capable of having a 5 in his hand. He could have had ace 5, right. With the 2 5s on board. Actually, he could have had deuce 5. I mean, right. So I'm not going to let that opportunity get away if that king doesn't come. So that's probably the only hand of the tournament that I regret, other than the one that I went out on. Of course, I regret it.
I mean, Carroll's table talk is definitely a part of his style at the table, but it did seem like a lot of his talk kind of got you to talk too. You kind of would talk back to him, kind of like trying to, give him his taste of his own medicine. Are you normally that talkative at the table, or are you a bit more reserved? You usually are.
I'm usually the comedian at the table, and I'm usually the guy. I'm talking a lot, but I'm also noticing everything that goes on around me. A lot of times you get caught up, you start talking, and you kind of let things go that you shouldn't. But that's actually part of my game is the talking, and I try to make friends at the table. But I'm really truthfully trying to make friends at the table, but it also helps you in certain circumstances because I don't know, people maybe let up a little bit or something like that. But yes, I am talkative at the table.
Okay. And did you feel like you and Carrel it was getting it all personal, or was it just all in good fun for the most part with that sort of table talk dynamic you had?
Oh, 1,000,000% fun. I liked him. I thought I admired his game. I thought he was a great player, and I knew what he was going to do to me before he did it, and he would. And there's nothing you can do about that. You just have to hope, that he doesn't have anything, or he doesn't pick you to pick on, so to speak. But no, I liked him real well. And like I said, I admired his game. I think he's a good player, and he's proven that since then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Table Talk was really interesting in 2017 because we're coming right after the very infamous Will Kassouf, who was very talkative at the table in a sort of harmful manner. How do you feel about Table Talk in general, and given your experience, how do you feel that Table Talk has evolved over time in poker?
Well, I mean, it was a very quiet game.
Mm-hmm.
And, people were afraid to talk, number one. But what I don't like, the evolution of smart aleck talk at the table. Mm-hmm. I don't like that. I don't think that you should get personal. I don't think that you should, mistreat people or be rude. I don't like them doing that with players, and I especially don't like them doing that with dealers. A dealer's nothing but a referee.
Yeah.
And they have nothing to do with it whatsoever. And how anybody can, if a guy blames a dealer, he's not a very good player or a very good person, in my opinion. But I don't like the negative table talk.
Mm-hmm. And I do feel that table talk was a important element of the entertainment factor of that main event in particular, because you had very talky, enjoyable guys like Mickey Kraft, Charlie Carrel, John Hesp, as well as you, kind of livening up the game with sort of lighthearted, comedic sort of table talk. Do you feel that those other players that I just listed there? Did you have any interaction with those players during that main event?
Well, I didn't play with John Hess, but I knew Mickey real well. I've known Mickey for several years. And what you saw on television with Mickey was Mickey. That there was no show there. That was exactly how he was. And he didn't care. He wasn't a successful poker player before or after, but he was a great guy. Both before and after, and he knew he was there to have fun more than to have a chance to win. I would have loved to have his chip stack for about 5 minutes, but especially with Charlie, I think I could have tried to give Charlie a little bit of his own medicine. But anyway, Mickey, I think he partied too much and threw his chance away at actually having a chance to at least final table that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think he had around like 4 million chips on day 5 at one point, and I think he busted well before you did on that that secondary table.
Yeah, he did.
And there was really kind of two halves to the Snuffer Carrel quarrel. Because the first couple of showdowns he gets the better of you, and then you find yourself all in holding pocket jacks or the Belon McCarran Memorial hands, and one of the more wild runouts you'll ever have, a back and forth turn ace river jack to give you the full double. When you're all in like that for your tournament life, how stressful is that for you, or is it just kind of like it is what it is?
It is stressful. When that ace came up, I was trying to find a door to get through in my mind. And when the jack came up, I just hit a home run in the bottom of the ninth in the World Series in baseball. So yeah, it was a roller coaster ride, and yes, I can say that it was stressful. Well, not in the sense of it like a business stress, but it's like, oh no, this guy's got 3 outs and he just hits it. He shouldn't even be in there with ace-7.
Yeah.
And here we go again. And then I'm never dreaming a jack is coming. Yeah. And when it came, I think I swallowed too much of my drink and did a fist pump and sat back down.
Yeah, and then after that, your table gets moved from that featured TV table spot to the outer tables. Once again, you find yourself in a big hand against Charlie Carrel when you have the ace-7, and it's a mostly harmless-ish board, but Charlie's table talk, kicks back in. He says a line kind of like, "You're going to call me up a 7, like ace-7, and I'm going to look very silly." What led you to make that call for all your chips on the river?
I was probably going to call him anyway because I knew for sure from the very beginning, I knew he was capable of playing any 2 cards. But then it was so similar to the talk that he had done on the ace-5-5 board.
Right.
And he said, what's going to happen is you're going to call with a 7, probably something like ace-7, which is pretty good. I mean, that's that's a Negrano call right there.
Yeah.
And he said, and I'm going to look really silly. As soon as he said that, I don't think I immediately called, but I did in my mind.
Right.
So that his table talk hurt him on that hand because he replicated what he had done when I folded the winning hand.
And so that hand actually got you up to about 1.3 million chips, and then we don't actually see you again in the rest of the episode until you actually bust out. From that point on, were you just mostly kind of folding your way down to a shorter stack, or were there some exciting hands that we just didn't see?
No, there was nothing. Actually, the only meaningful hand I played, because like I said, the blinds go up, and of course, fortunately, they go up very slowly in the main, but I never had a stack, and I thought, well, if I can double up one more time, I can play. So I was going to wait on a premium hand, and I did. And in a good position, and I was, because the guy in front of me opens up, and the guy, he was 2 or 3 ahead of him at the other end of the table. He shoves all in, and of course, he was a real active player, and there's no way I'm folding to him, and so I shove all in over top. Well, immediately the guy that originally opened up shoves all in, and I knew, hey, I got very little hope here. I'm hoping he has ace king, and the other guy has jacks or 10s. Well, I got half of my wish. The guy that I thought I had beat had jacks, but he had kings, and then boom, king in the window, and by the turn we were both drawing dead. So,
how many times had you been all in the entire tournament?
I think for my tournament life, I'm pretty sure that's the only time that I was in other than the hand you saw.
Wow.
I made a call that I took way too long to make. It was actually before going to the TV table, to the feature table. I think I had ace-9, and it was a jack-high board, and it just didn't make sense. No, I didn't. I had pocket 9s on a jack-high board, and it didn't make sense to me. And my 9 blocked a straight, so I made a big call for my tournament life. Gotcha. That's the only times and I was fortunate enough to have the right read, and I think that's the only times that I had my tournament life on the line.
Okay. And so you go out in 96th place.
Yes.
What was your plan after the main event? Did you play any other events? Did you go home? Did you stick around and watch the action?
I stayed and played. I actually cashed, I think, in a win tournament, and maybe another tournament away from there. The biggest loss I had while I was there, I came in 40th.
Wow.
And I'm trying to think of drawing a blank here about where I played. It was a very big tournament. Because I think for 40th, I think I got 14 or 15,000, and I absolutely punted at 40th. It was the last end of the night, and a guy called me all the way down, and he had been jibber jabbering about that the whole time. So I should have not even bet the turn, even though I knew I was ahead, because I knew he was on a draw, and he was on a straight draw and hit a set of sixes.
Wow.
And I shoved all in. Of course, he beat me in the pot, and I went out 40th. And I should have. I had enough chips that I could have possibly won that tournament. And like I said, it was a big tournament.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, speaking to the ESPN coverage, you're shown in several hands and also in a couple of interview segments. What was your experience being interviewed like?
I liked it. I had been interviewed I'd made a couple of HPT final tables, and I'd been now on those. I was the most nervous guy in the world, and for some reason at World Series of Poker, I wasn't nervous. Maybe because of the prior experience. But to show my nerves at the HPT, I've got a record that'll never be broken. I was the first guy to get a penalty on the first hand, the very first hand. It was with Greg Raymer.
Wow!
Oh no!
And I'm the chip leader, and I looked down very first hand. I'm under the gun. I look down ace queen suited. So I raise, and he shoves all his chips in, but 7 $5,000 chips. And I look at him and I say, "Are you all in?" And he put those googly glasses on, put his hand over his mouth, and I thought he said yes. So I said, "Call." I turned my cards over, and they penalized me, but I got penalized worse than that. The flop was 10-10 deuce, and he had ace deuce, and it held up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he doubled up, and I got a 1-round penalty. Well, now, if I wasn't nervous, now I'm really nervous. But I end up coming in fourth. I went out with the ace king of hearts to pocket tens, and a 10 in a window, and a king on the river to turn the knife a little bit.
Gosh.
Yeah. But so I think a couple of those experiences helped me not to be so nervous at the WSOP.
Now, this main event was a first for the tournament because it was both originally shown live on ESPN, and then afterwards they produced episodes just of the recorded footage. So really, people could experience this main event in two different ways. Did you watch yourself in these episodes after the fact?
Yeah, I actually I watched it twice, and not the full thing. But the last time I watched it was probably in February of this year, right before my daughter passed away. We watched it together.
Okay.
And so that's the first time I had watched it in full. Yeah.
Gotcha. And did you like watching yourself on TV? Is it kind of cringeworthy, or is it just kind of like, hey, you're on TV, that's pretty cool?
I can't say as I liked it, because you always are your own worst critic.
Right.
But I mean, it was cool because everybody that you saw after that, they know who you are, and they come. Of course, I knew a lot of people anyway because, like I said, I try to be a friendly person. I talk to everybody, but I don't know. I had mixed feelings on it. I didn't particularly like what I saw, but then I was happy to be there.
Gotcha. What was the response back home of friends and family when they learned that you were, this big poker star on TV for day 5 of the main event?
Well, as you know, the poker stuff only means something to people who play poker. Usually, the other people, it's like if you know a chess champion, it doesn't mean anything if you don't play chess.
Good point.
But as far as, most people do play poker now. So I can say that I got a lot of, people talking to me and people talking about it and things like that. Even what shocked me was there was a church that after the service they had a big TV in the basement, and they went down and watched it and was rooting for me in the church. That's used to, if you were a poker player, you were one step above a bank robber unless the bank robber was kin to you. I mean, and so now they're watching it at a church. So it was exciting. I mean, I like that part of it. It allowed me to get to know a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And how was the support network for you during your main event run? Did you have somebody giving you updates about other players or talking to you on the rail?
I would talk to people on the rail, but I really didn't want any updates. I really didn't. I like to go off of my reads, my feel, and it probably sounds wrong, but I mean, I've played enough poker, and I was born with certain things that you could, you know whether a guy's a rock or if he's wide open or if he's subject to bluff all his chips off and things like that. So I'd say that's what people were looking for, and then again, that's like if somebody had watched me play, they wouldn't have recognized the me that they normally would have played against. So I thought that could be the case here too. So somebody come and told me that Charlie had Queen 7 on that hand, which it didn't surprise me. I didn't fold because of Charlie's hand. I folded because that king came, and I feel like I'm possibly calling all my chips off for a chop. And if he wakes up with a 5, I'm gone. But no, to answer your question, no, I didn't use that information.
So while you're running deep, I mean, you made the top 100, you made it to day 5. Are you thinking about the money jumps, or I've made it to the top 100, or are you just sort of focused on your game?
No, I'm just focused on the game. Now, if we would have got up closer, then I would have been focusing on money jumps, and maybe even now I would focus on money jumps. I don't know, because I'm different now than I was then. But at that time, I'm focusing on getting some chips that I can play with to try to win that tournament.
Were you ever starstruck walking around the main event for the first time and seeing all these famous celebrities?
No, because I'd played with a big part of them. A lot of those guys came to Cherokee, and I'd done well there a few times, and I played quite a bit at the Borgata, and they came to the Borgata, and so there was just a few of the people, like Gus Hansen. I'd never met him before. I wasn't starstruck, but we took a picture together, and I posted on Facebook. I said, "Here's the best looking guy in poker." And Gus Hansen.
That's wonderful.
That's a good one.
But no, I wasn't starstruck. I'll tell you one kind of funny story. The magician comes out, and he looks like he's been drunk for about 6 months. He walks out this side door, and I said, "Buddy," and I didn't know him. I said, "Buddy, you look like you've been rode hard and put up wet." And he said, "Thank you, sir." But he did. He looked rough.
Yeah. And so, currently in the podcast, we are up to 2019 for the main event, and you can attest to running fairly deep in that main event as well. Tell us what led you to jump back into the main event scene that year.
Well, 2018, I didn't get to play because I was back working in business, and I was back working on a divorce. And so it was a real hectic year. So I played very little in 2018. 2019, I decided to start back playing some again. And so, of course, I was going to go play that. And my mind wasn't nearly as clear because I just sold the business in 2019, but there was a lot of residual paperwork and tax things to do, and so I'm still giving more than 50% of my stuff away to my ex-wife and things of that nature.
Right.
So I wasn't as mentally focused as I had been in 2017.
Mm. And so, do you still find that your experience 2 years prior played an important role in preparing you for the flow of the tournament again?
Yes.
Yes. And so, tell us what was the trajectory of your tournament? Did you have a lot of chips? Were you a short stack? Were you in the middle? Was it similar to 2017, or was it kind of a different story?
I would have liked to have reversed those two chip stacks. I think it was day 4 that I went out in 2017, and I had a good chip stack, and I bluffed off quite a bit of them, and knowing that I'm bluffing them off. I mean, the last bet I made, I should have just stacked them over in his stack because I knew he was going to call. And then I actually made a bad call, a bad bluff, and then I lost a race. And I had plenty of chips. I mean, I should have easily went deeper than I went in 2017, but I didn't. And I was sick when I got up from the table. I was happy that I cashed. I was 2 for 2 and cashing the main event, but I was very, very unhappy with how I played 2019.
I think the biggest difference between those two main events, besides that second one being slightly on the bigger side field-wise, was they introduced the big blind ante rule to the tournament. Are you a fan of that rule?
I like it. I could go either way, but I kind of like it. It speeds the game up because the guy can't say, "Well, I put my ante in there," So I like that part of it. I'm about equal on that. The only thing I like about it is that it does speed the game up. And it allows you a little bit of leeway till you do become the big blind, as far as anting your chips away when you're short stacked.
Right.
And building off of that sort of desire to speed the game up, do you mind a shot clock? And what sort of shot clock would you like to see in the main event?
Well, I don't mind it at all. And I haven't given enough thought to be able to tell you what the proper shot clock. I know one thing. I went through a whole quarter on that one call in 2017. But those guys, I kept apologizing. I said, "No, this is your tournament life. We understand." And probably, too, a lot of times they knew that while the clock was moving, people were getting knocked out, too. So, but I really can't give you an honest answer on what I think it should be, but I definitely think there should be one.
Gotcha.
That's fair enough. Yeah.
And obviously, the pandemic has kind of put a temporary pause on the poker world for a lot of players. A lot of players migrated to playing online. Have you ever played poker online?
Oh yeah. I've played. I actually still play online. Speaking of slowing it down, it took mine to a halt. I played in January of 2020, and I went to the Borgata and played a little bit, and I got sick while I was there. And I'm not sure I had COVID, but if I didn't, I don't want COVID. But it took me a month to get better, and I haven't played. I told you I played a little home tournament, but I hadn't played anything live since then. So I play a little online. I don't like online as well because it doesn't give you you can read betting patterns and certain things, but you can't read the person's reactions, and it's much faster. And there's a lot more bad beats due to the more hands you play. And I think online, this will probably get me in trouble, but I believe it's juiced. I don't think it's fixed at all. I think it's juiced for bad beats to encourage the bad players to play. That's my opinion, and from what I've seen, and I've got to see quite a bit in the last two and a half years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you feel collusion is a problem in online poker?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, collusion, in my book, I said, if you got green paper with dead presidents' pictures on it, there's going to be somebody trying to get it. Mm-hmm. And even your really, really good players now are being accused of collusion. But, yeah, absolutely. That's the one thing, another thing I don't like about cash. See, in tournaments, you might be able to have collusion, but it would have to be sporadic because you have to bump into the people you're trying to collude with. Mm-hmm. Well, in a cash game, 2 or 3 of you just jump in, you're sitting there talking on the phone or maybe sitting beside of each other. And yes, I know there's collusion and I don't like it.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Do you think there's anything that can be done to prevent that?
No. I mean, are there things that can be done to slow it down? I think they're doing it. Mm-hmm. But to prevent it, it's like trying to prevent stealing. Mm-hmm. You know, somebody's going to steal no matter what. So no, I don't think it can be eliminated. Even live, there's like, we don't have time to go into it, and I won't, but there's so many things live that you can do, include, without ever speaking a word. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, because we had signs for everything from the beautiful girl that walked in the room to fold or raise or what have you in the poker games. Just little insignificant signs. Well, that can be done. I mean, I've been in many a live game that I thought that, well, I knew there was collusion. Mm-hmm. But collusion doesn't necessarily lead to success in all cases. It will in the long run, but it can get you in trouble.
Mm-hmm. So moving forward, obviously the WSOP is underway for this year. Do you have any plans on playing this year, and what are your sort of future plans for poker?
Well, I don't. I would give anything to play anywhere. Mm-hmm. I've had a kidney transplant, and so that lowers your immune system, mm-hmm. which not only increases your chance of getting COVID, but it increases your chances of getting much more sick. Right. And so, I've pretty much been a hermit for 2.5 years. Now, I got infusions because the shots didn't work for me, so mm-hmm. I got infusions. So I'm supposed to be 80% covered, but I'm still a little hesitant about getting out. Mm-hmm. My plans for the future are, as soon as it's somewhat safe, in 2020, I was going to start traveling and playing poker pretty much full time. I would never want to live that lifestyle, but I was going to travel to a lot of places mm-hmm. and play a ton of different tournaments. Well, that's still my plan, but it's had a 2.5-year layoff so far.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
I mean, what they're doing at a lot of casinos now is they're putting up plexiglass between players and also requiring players to wear masks inside. Is that something that you'd be comfortable with, or do you feel like masks take away your ability to read other players?
No, I would be comfortable with it. I would give away my ability to read the players to be able to play. Mm-hmm. But they've taken most of that down. I stay in touch with a lot of people. A lot of people call me, "Hey, you coming? Oh, come on, come to this one." And they've like, I don't think in Vegas they're a mandatory mask. I know like in Cherokee, I don't think it was. Cincinnati and some of the local places have done away with the mask, and they did away with the plexiglass a long time ago. Mm-hmm. That's my understanding. Like I said, I haven't been in any. I have a casino within 3 minutes of where I live, mm-hmm. and I haven't stepped in it. It was February the 29th of 2020 for that little tournament. It's the last time I stepped in there.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel like you are a no-limit hold'em player for life, or do you mix in the other games nowadays? I know you said that you began playing other games besides No Limit Hold'em, but which games do you dabble in?
Well, I think my Hold'em game is my strongest game, but I like PLO and of course I like 7-card stud and all the mixed games. I had planned on, if I went back to the series, playing those because they're smaller fields, they're bigger buy-ins, but they're smaller fields, and once you've played, I think it's much easier to get back into a game that you'd played for a long time than it is like when I first started Hold'em. I really had never played Hold'em.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And in terms of buy-ins, are you sort of sticking with the lower end, or are you going to mix it up with some higher buy-ins?
I'm comfortable with $5,000-$10,000 buy-ins. The biggest buy-in I was ever in, and I bubbled a satellite to a straight bubbled. It was 15,000. I think it was 15,400. It was at the Borgata. Okay. It was the World Poker Tour Championship or something. Mm-hmm. But something in that range, I'm comfortable with.
Have you ever, in your poker career, developed any rivalries as deep or as intense as your one with Charlie Carrel in any other tournament before?
Oh yeah, yeah. Mo Hawkins and I had some pretty good battles back a few years ago, and yeah, but there's a few people that I have a rivalry with, but most of them are very friendly rivalries. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Intense but friendly.
And on the flip side, who have you had a good rapport with?
Like Darvin Moon and I were really good friends, and a ton of people. I don't know if you know Jake Baisley. Yep. I know Aaron Massey real well. Actually, Raymer and I probably played against each other more than I've played against most people. So we've got a good rapport. There's a ton of other players that I respect and have had some pretty good battles with.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is your poker high point? Like the most, the best hand or play or just achievement that you've had that you'd say is that's number one?
Well, I don't know. It'd probably be a tie. I won a tournament. I think there was 872 players in it at the Borgata, and I was fortunate enough to beat Chad Brown heads up to win it. That's probably the high point, I think. That and of course, the WSOP, and then when they only took 6 to the final HPT table, that was right there. But Chad Brown, I want to mention this. My daughter, who was my biggest fan, said, "That's Chad Brown." I said, "Well, I know it's Chad Brown, but it's not that Chad Brown." And she said, "Yes, it is." I said, "I'm telling you, this is an older guy. This is not Chad Brown." And it was. He had gotten really sick and lost a lot of weight and aged, and it was him. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's see. Sam, any other questions you want to ask?
Yeah. Do you have any particular favorite casinos or any sort of poker places that you think other people should visit?
Well, I love the Borgata. To me, it was the Vegas of the East. They always had great tournaments, and then Cherokee. Everybody loves Cherokee. It's that's where I think they still hold the WSOP championship there. For the rings and things. It's really nice. It's out in the middle of nowhere. You got a trout stream running right. You could fish off of the balcony of the restaurant attached to the casino. You could trout fish. It's beautiful there. Wow, cool. So those are two of my favorite.
Mm-hmm. Now that poker is a bit on the downswing for you right now, what other things do you like to do to occupy your time nowadays?
Well, I love to fish although I went fishing about, I don't know, a month and a half ago for the first time. I say I went to a little trout place or something to stay away, because I try to stay away from people, but I took my boat out for the first time. And I love fishing. I love the outdoors, although I've spent most of this 2.5 years like a prisoner, just staying inside, just trying to dodge getting sick. You know, I have everything delivered. They leave it at the front door. So I don't really have a lot of that. Would, you know, sports, any type of sports. I love sports. I love LeBron, and that gets him in trouble. And so I tape all his games. And then, like I said, I play some online poker, and I love to fish when I get a chance. And other than that, during the pandemic, that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've mentioned a couple times that you've written a book. How's that going, and what's the book about?
Well, somebody should shoot me, because I sat down. I was playing little online tournaments, and so I sat down and wrote that book, and it didn't take me very long. And the holdup was I couldn't figure out the proper ending, because it's called When the Dealing's Done. Okay. And what that meant was, it has that's in the song When the Dealing's Done's a Kenny Rogers song, The Gambler. Well, when I became a Christian, I had to quit cheating people, so I quit dealing. Well, during the end of that, I was going through some marital issues with my first wife. Here I am broadcasting this. But anyway, I didn't know how to put that, you know, because my children, my grandchildren. And so I just kind of laid it to the side. I actually had 2 or 3 different people talking to me about writing a screenplay and trying to make a movie out of it. And I mean, because it's all true, and it's got quite a few well-known pool players. It's all true stories, and it would teach people how not to get cheated in poker in certain ways. But I don't know. I haven't had the mental, I won't say mental capacity, but the mental want to sit down and finish. It's finished. It's just probably a little bit of it. I've already had it edited. I just want to change the ending. And I will say this: I have put in some risque stuff and taking it back out and putting it back in and taking it back out. So that's been a battle with me about whether I should. It would make the story more real, and it probably for most people, make it better. But then for others, it might be offensive. So I don't know. That's the holdups right there.
And, you know, speaking about your family, are there any other poker players in the family?
Well, I told you my dad was. And, of course, he passed away in 1993. But my daughter was a really, really good player, my biggest fan. But she didn't have the confidence. If she had had the confidence, she could have been, she wouldn't have been Vanessa Selps, but she could have been a great woman. Now, that sounds wrong. That'll get me in trouble. But you understand what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yes.
She had the aggressive tone to her game that a lot of women don't have. Now, I'm not saying all women, but a lot. Yeah. Same thing, I'll put myself in that. You know, most older guys are known for being rocks. They're known for, you know, playing their hand. They're known for not being super aggressive. And so, as I mentioned earlier, that helped me. Well, by the same thing, that helped her being a woman player.
Gotcha.
But she never did go play any large. She played mostly small tournaments at her local casino.
Okay. And, you know, as far as, I think wrapping things up here, so, you know, you had mentioned before about your daughter recently passing away, and, you know, to respect her, you know, following you as a poker player, you know, we have prepared a special tributes, a bunch of pictures that you provided me to sort of to end this episode, so that you guys can stick to the end to see that tribute. Any final things you have to say about anything to us, Cotton?
That I really appreciate this interview, and I've enjoyed it, and I'm rooting for you guys, and I'm going to start following you, and pass the word along for others to follow you. But first and foremost, I want to thank you so much for the tribute that you're doing. That means more to me than all the poker and everything else in the world.
Well, again, thank you for giving us some of your time and telling us some great insight, some great stories into some very intriguing things. And we love talking to people like you who we see on TV, just to see the other side of the story.
Well, I thank you so much.
Yeah, it was a pleasure speaking to you. Anything that you'd like to plug here at the end? Your upcoming book, maybe, or something else?
Well, my book is called When the Dealing's Done, and I hope to get enough motivation to get it out there within the next year. I've had 2.5 years where I could have done it, but I just wasn't mentally ready. But other than that, just hopefully look for me out on the tour before too long.
Same hat and same sunglasses and all that?
Well, I look more like Ichabod Crane than I do Heisenberg right now. I've got a full gray beard, but I'll probably go back to the look. I love my hat. And by the way, I do want to say this. Most people don't know this. The people that know me well do. That look was absolutely 100% accidental.
Okay.
A guy gave me we were bagging in Cincinnati. We were bagging for a tournament, and I didn't know him, and we had been bantering back and forth, and got to be pretty good friends. And I said, "Let me wear that hat." So I grabbed it and put it on. It came down to about my chin. And he said, "Listen, I got a hat that I think will fit you, and if I don't make it, I'll leave it here for you." Well, the next morning he didn't make it. The next morning on my chips was that hat, and I started wearing it, and then I turned it around backwards, and I went to the Borgata after that. And here's how I found out about Heisenberg. I'd never watched the show, didn't know anything. Guy walks up to my table, and he said, "Hey, man, you been cooking any crystal meth?" And I said, "What?" And so that's exactly how. And then they had a Russian contingency of some kind come up there, and they're all Heisenberg, take a picture. And I went to Panama and for poker tournament, and they did the same thing. So then it just took off. Then I was blogged from then on as Walter White or Heisenberg, and I did not have any idea who either of them were. Yep.
Have you since watched Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul?
I watched 7 episodes back several years ago, and I don't know.
It's not for you.
I just thought I'm just not. I have other reasons too.
Okay. Yeah.
I hate drugs, number one.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, I probably will someday if I live long enough.
Well, again, thank you so much for your time and for telling us some great stories. The next episode of this podcast will be covering the 2019 main event, so getting pretty darn close to the modern main event this year. And we will see you guys for this podcast next time. Check out this tribute coming up right after we sign off here. And until then, guys, enjoy your poker, enjoy your TV, and enjoy your poker on TV.
Take care, everyone.
All right.